Books, books. I like books. I'm gonna read them all.
Hi readers, Chris here. Welcome to my channel where I review fantasy, Stephen King, all sorts of books, and today I'm going to be talking about my March wrap-up and my April TBR. But before I get into that, I don't want to make anyone wait any longer, and I'm going to pick a winner for the giveaway that I did recently to celebrate 400 subscribers. First off, thank you so much to everyone who entered. I think this is the most entries that I've had for a giveaway to date, which is super exciting. And I know there's like a way more official way to do this. I've used like Wheel of Names and that type of stuff, but I decided to go old school and write everyone's name down on a piece of paper, put it in this cute little mug. So yeah, I'm gonna pick a name right now, announce the winner, and then we'll jump into everything else. If you're not interested, there's chapter time, so you can skip ahead if you want. So without further ado, let me pick one here. Sure, that looks like a good one. And let's see who it is. It is Shady Side Library. Shady Side Library, you won the giveaway. Woohoo, woohoo. Thank you so much for being a subscriber of mine, for commenting on my videos, liking, all the things. So you have 5 days to reach out to me. My info is in the About tab. You can either send me an email, a DM, let me know which book you want, where you want it from, and I'll get it sent to you. Okay, so let's talk about March. And I'm going to keep my fingers here because I just took a sip of water and spilled it on me. So anyway, March was an interesting month for me because I enjoyed most of the books I read, but there wasn't like any book that was like a total blew my mind, total standout. And when it came to ranking them, I think my bottom two are kind of tied. And I didn't hate either of these books, but I just had some like issues that I couldn't quite overcome. And since I have to pick one first, my least favorite book of March is Immortal Longings by Chloe Gong. This book, it's not even that I dislike it. I just found this book weird. Like, that is the best word I can describe this book as. It's just weird, it's bizarre, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So the whole premise of this book is we have this young girl, her name is Kala, and she is allegedly this princess who has been exiled for murdering her parents. I'll come back to that. And in this city, there's like this game that's played that anyone can enter, and the winner of this game gets all this money, all this fame, all this fortune. So most people enter these games because they want the fame and fortune. She enters the game because at the end you get an audience with the king, and she wants to kill the king. Her whole MO, her whole motivation for killing people and murdering and doing all this stuff is so that she can kill this king, because he is so bad and so awful and all these things that she just needs to murder him to, like, I don't know, help the people of the city that she lives in. Now, this king is in like 2 scenes in this book, like a flashback scene and then what happens at the final confrontation at the end. Like, that's it. And I love a good villain. I love a good villain. That is not a good villain to me. We're just told that he's horrible and he does all these things, but we never really see it because we never really see him in the book. And then the whole games part, like, the book never fully explains what the rules are of this game, other than 100 people go out into the city and kill each other until there's just one person left. But, like, I have so many questions. Oh, and I didn't even mention, like, what the main premise of the story is, and that is people can jump bodies. So, like, my soul can leave my body and inhabit someone else's body. Again, I have a lot of questions about how this works, and the book does try to explain it, but there's also a passage here that I tabbed where the book claims that, like, a physical body isn't important. It's what's on the inside that counts. However, our main character refuses to leave her body. So it's like, which is it? Is it the body doesn't matter, or does it matter the most? It's what's the word? It's not consistent between the message it's trying to share. There is very much a faceless villain, so I couldn't connect with that. And again, there's too many questions, too many unanswered questions. This one is just weird. That's why it's at the bottom. My next least favorite book of March, very different, and I dislike it for very different reasons, and that is The Vampire Diaries by L.J. Smith. And it's not so much that I dislike this one. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have used those words. I just have a lot of issues with it. And most of my issues center around the main character, Elena. So the whole premise of this book is we have a teenage girl, Elena. She is in high school, and she is like the most popular girl in school. She's the queen of the high school. Every girl wants to be her. Every boy wants to be with her. And there's a new student who comes to school. His name is Stefan, and he's very dark and broody and mysterious. And of course, Elena, as soon as she sets eyes on him, is like, I want him. I want him to be my boyfriend. And then the whole plot of this book is basically centered around Elena trying to get Stefan to date her and fall in love with her. Yes, that is the whole book. And Elena's entire character is centered around her desire to get a boyfriend. I very much dislike that. So maybe if I had read this in my younger years, I probably would have liked it more. But now that I am a 40-year-old woman, like, I am beyond stories like this with female characters who are completely defined by their romantic relationships. Like, I cannot get on board with that. Not only that, but Elena just comes across as like so selfish and so self-centered. Like, she has female friends like Bonnie and Meredith. She only ever talks to her female friends about Stefan and about the boy. She never asks her friends, like, hey, how are you? How are you doing? Like, are you okay? It's, no, I need you guys to do this for me so I can get Stefan. I mean, no. Now, the only thing that saves this book for me is there is a second boy, Damon, who is Stefan's brother. And if you're familiar with the TV show, yes, I don't think it's a spoiler to say Stefan and Damon are vampires because this is literally called The Vampire Diaries. But if you didn't know, sorry, you do now. So the only thing that saves this series for me is Damon. I feel like Damon is the only character that has, like, a lot more depth and nuance than Elena, and then even Stefan, he's so, like, one note. I feel like Damon is the only one who's, like, has personality and characteristics, and I find him the most interesting character in the series. I also loved him in the TV show, so if it wasn't for Damon, this book would have been at the bottom, but I am a huge Damon fan. Okay, so now we're going to get into the books that I liked more. So my fourth favorite book of March is The Heir by Kiera Cass. This is the fourth book in her selection series, but it actually is like the start of a new trilogy. So the first 3 books are a contained story, and this starts a new story. And in the original selection, it was about a young girl named America who basically entered like a reality game show type situation where 30 women dated the prince, and then one of them would get to marry the prince at the end. Now, in this book, our main character is Adalyn, and she is the princess. So her selection, we have 30 men that are trying to date her. And when I started this book, I was also kind of annoyed at Adalyn's character. I thought we have another female character who seems very stiff, very wooden, doesn't have a lot of personality. But as the book kind of goes along, Like, you really start to understand why she is that way and why she has all these walls up and why she keeps people at a distance. So even though her character starts off annoying, her character has actual legitimate development and growth by the end, and I really like that. I feel like it did take a bit too long to get to that, which is why it's not higher on my list. But I have a feeling that some of the other books in the series may make it higher because this is just the first one. This was just our first introduction to it. So I have very high hopes and very high expectations for this series now, even though this one had a bit of a slow start for me. Okay, number 2 and number 3, I pretty much liked equally. Again, for very different reasons, but because I have to pick one over the other, my third favorite book of March is going to be Song of Susannah by Stephen King. This is the 6th book in the Dark Tower series, and this was actually the last Dark Tower series book that I read way back when I first read the series. When I first read the series, I got all the way to Song of Susannah. I honestly don't remember why I never finished it, but I never did. And I really like this book. Again, as a female, I am very much drawn to Susannah's character because she's surrounded by, Roland, Eddie, Jake. There's a lot of men in this story. Susannah is kind of like the one female character. So I really like that this story focuses on her because Susannah finds herself in a very interesting situation. It would take forever to explain what the heck the Dark Tower is about if you don't know. But let's just say that there are a group of people who have been pulled from all different corners of the multiverse, and they've come together to take this quest on to travel to this mysterious Dark Tower, which is supposed to be like the nexus of all universes. And yeah, that's pretty much all you need to know. So in their quest for the Dark Tower, Susannah finds herself pregnant with child, as they like to refer to it. But the way that she gets pregnant, the way that happens is very bizarre. The child that she has, very bizarre. There's just a lot of bizarre things going on with this pregnancy. But I really liked, again, this story about Susannah. The reason it's not higher up is because there is something that happens in this book that I feel a bit conflicted about. And that is the fact that Stephen King is a character in this book. Yes, that's right. Stephen King put himself in this book as a character. Now, I remember the first time I read this thinking that was kind of a little bit ridiculous and kind of silly, and it kind of, I don't know, I wasn't a big fan of it. However, now that I'm reading it the second time, and not only am I reading this for the second time, but because I've read all his other books up until this point, all of them, every single one, him being a character in here makes more sense. And I don't know how else to explain it other than there are so many references, so many Easter eggs to his other books that it makes sense that he's in this book as a character. If you have read his entire bibliography, it makes sense. But if you haven't done that, it doesn't make sense. So I am still a little bit torn. I still think it's kind of, I don't know what I think it is. I still think it's kind of weird, I guess. But I have a much better understanding of it than I did the first time I read it. So if you are attempting to read The Dark Tower, I could give you a list of King books that, like, you must read these before you read this, because I think it'll make your experience that much better. So that brings me to my second favorite book of March, The Warm Hands of Ghosts by Katherine Arden. I was so excited about this book. Some of you may remember I'm a huge Katherine Arden fan. Her Winter Night trilogy is absolutely amazing and has ended up on my top 10 list for like the past however many years I've been reading it. Winter of the Witch was my favorite book of last year. So when I found out she was writing a new book, I was like, oh my God, yes, I have to read this. So the premise of this book is we have a young girl named Laura, and this takes place back during World War I, and she is a nurse, like a battlefield nurse. Now, her brother has mysteriously disappeared. He's a soldier. He's presumed dead, but Laura's like, no one knows for sure what happened to him. So she goes back out into the war zone as a nurse, but at the same time trying to look for her brother. Now, interspersed between her chapters, we get her brother's point of view. And I don't want to say what happens exactly, but let's just say her brother finds himself lost. He finds himself in a situation where he probably would have died, but he meets a German soldier, and even though these two are natural enemies on opposite sides of the war, they kind of help each other to survive. But what happens to them is part of the whole story, so I don't want to give it away. So anyway, that's all you need to know. That's all you need to know. Now, when I first started reading this, again, I will admit, the first half of this book is very slow. It is quite slow. It's a lot of character development. It's a lot of world building, but not like fantasy world building, just more of like setting the tone of like what it's like in this war and that kind of stuff. And it's very slow. Like, I could not see where the story was going. Like, I didn't understand where it was going. And it kind of continues to be slow in the second half, but it does pick up a little bit. It does pick up, and there's this mysterious character who comes into play, this guy named Folland, or the fiddler, I think they call him, this mysterious guy who sometimes appears to soldiers and may or not help people, and that's all I'm going to say about it. But at the end of the day, I really like this book. I like it because it's totally different than her Winter Night trilogy. It's like totally different. So if you're a big fan of that, just know that going in. It's totally different. But I kind of appreciate that it's different, if that makes sense. It's much more a historical fiction first, and like with like sprinklings of fantasy. Like, there's only really one fantastical thing about this story. Everything else is very much grounded in historical reality, all that kind of stuff. So again, just know that. But at the end of the day, again, I liked the characters a lot, and I really like the message that this book portrays, which I can't say what it is without giving the story away, but it's definitely one of those that's like really heartfelt, really touching, like really rooted in the love that people have for other people. I don't know how else to explain it than that. So between the characters, the emotion, the heart, all of that, yeah, I really like this one. And finally, that brings me to my number one favorite book of March, The Twisted Ones by T. Kingfisher. First, a huge thank you, shout out to Bad as Rad for recommending this book to me. This is actually, I believe, the first non-Stephen King horror book that I have ever read. And I've only read one T. Kingfisher book before, but it was a fantasy, not so much a horror, and this one's more like a straight horror. But I really liked this one. I really liked it. So basically, again, we have a young girl who, her grandmother has recently died, and she is tasked with going to her grandmother's house, which is kind of out in the boonies, and like cleaning it up. Except her grandmother was a grade A hoarder, so her house is just full of crap, and she finds this journal from her step grandfather, so not grandfather by blood, but the man who married her grandmother. He had died like previously years ago, but she finds this journal of his that's full with all of this weird stuff, and it mentions these people called the Twisted Ones, and like all this creepy books and creepy stuff, and she's kind of like drawn to it because she wants to know more. I feel like I would be the same way. Even after reading this, I think I would still want to know. And all these weird things kind of start happening in the house and in the area. And long story short, like, yeah, there are some real creepy things going out in the woods. There are dead things that are trying to get her. But luckily, she has some really helpful neighbors that come to her aid. So first of all, the whole setup I thought of this was really interesting. I will say that I thought at the end things got a little wacky, so that's why I'm saying, like, this book didn't, like, blow my mind, but I still really enjoyed it. Like, yeah, it gets a little wacky at the end. But anyway, before that, I love the characters. I love that she has a dog. I love her neighbors. She has this one neighbor named Foxy, who's kind of like this older, she's kind of like a hippie type character, but she really comes to the girl's aid, like spends the night in this house with her, even though she knows that there's terrible, like, horrific stuff going on. I mean, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So yeah, at the end of the day, I found this one really fun. I feel like it's not too horrific. If you're someone that's, like, unsure of horror, I feel like this has just enough of, like, the creep factor and just enough of, like, scary, creepy, crawly factor without being too extreme. At least that's the way that I felt anyway. So yeah, I really love this one, and I am looking forward to expanding my horror horizons. So that is everything from March, and I feel like this video is getting real long, but I'm going to quickly go through my April TBR, starting with my 2 reader recommendations. Yes, that's right. I have 2 because both of these books are a bit short, so I thought I could double up. The first one is going to be The Girl from the Well by Chupeco. This is a new author to me. This is another horror book, so I'm really interested to see how this compares to the Twisted Ones. And I actually got this book from David from David's Book Reviews. So David, I know it's taken me a while to get to this one, but I finally did, so I can't wait to let you know what I think. And secondly, I picked up a copy of The Two Foxes by Nicole Pierman, aka Nicole's Bookish Nook. I've never read anything by Nicole before, so I am super excited to dive into this one. This one says it's about a young Puritan woman plotting her escape from religious abuse in this riveting 17th century historical fantasy novel. I love historical, I love fantasy, so I thought this would be a great one to try, and yeah, looking forward to diving in. Next up, I'm continuing my Stephen King journey with, finally, The Dark Tower. This is the 7th and final book in the Dark Tower series. I am so excited that I am finally reading this one, because I've had this book for like 20 years. You can see how discolored it is. The only problem is this book is over 800 pages, so it is quite a chunker, but that's okay. I think I'm up to the challenge. Next up, I have my rando pick for the month, and this one is kind of a random pick, but it is Virgin Earth by Philippa Gregory. I'm a huge Philippa Gregory fan. I've pretty much read everything she's ever written, except for this one. Now, this is a sequel to Earthly Joys, and I struggled with Earthly Joys, so I'm hoping that this one is better. But basically, it's about a young man who is the gardener of the king, and because he is the gardener of the king, he kind of travels to all these exotic places to find new flowers and stuff. So, like, the first book was very much about planting and gardening, but it was also about this one young man and how his beliefs are challenged and all this stuff. And this one features the son now. So the son has taken over the business, and he's actually traveling to the New World, to America, to find new plants and all this stuff. And again, this is still a very tumultuous time in England, where we have, the Protestants and the Catholics, coming to war possibly. So yeah, I'm only a few chapters in, and already I'm finding this one way more fast-paced than the first one. So hopefully that continues because, again, this is not a short book, so I'm hoping it's more enjoyable than the first one. For my YA fantasy, I am reading The Crown. This is the next book in the selection series. And again, I am really looking forward to diving into this one because I think the first one set everything up beautifully. So I'm really looking for more character development, more relationship building, and I have a couple guesses on who she might end up with, like who might win the selection game. So I'm curious to see if I'm right. And finally, that brings me to my final book, my book box book, and that is actually going to be Bride by Ali Hazelwood. Now, I took the dust jacket off of this cover because it's so pretty and I didn't want to ruin it. So this is actually the hard case. I was a little hesitant to pick this one because I sometimes struggle with romance and I feel like I just read a lot of romance, and this is a vampire werewolf romance, and I'm like, do I really want to read another one of those? But I'm only like 5 chapters in. I'm actually really liking this one so far. So I don't know what's happened to me, but I'm liking vampire romances, or at least I'm liking this one. I like Crave, didn't like the Vampire Diaries. Seems like I'm liking this one. So yeah, so I was nervous to pick it, but now I'm excited. So there you have it. That's everything I read in March, everything I'm going to be reading in April. So now Swiper and I want to know from you, what are you going to be reading in April? Is it anything I mentioned, anything new? Let Swiper and I know in the comments below. And as always, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not already, please subscribe to my channel for more furry friends and more bookish stuff coming your way soon. All right, everyone. Happy reading.